Daniel 2, verse 1. Now, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. So, first of all, interesting that is second year, making reference to the end of times because of the fact that we read in Hosea that Yahweh would manifest on earth as he did through Mashiach the first, Yahushua, and then he would go for 2 days and come back to bring basically the reward and resurrection for those who would be awaiting him. So the number 2 represents the 2,000 years, because for Yahweh one day, well, what 1,000 years to Yahweh is one day. So those 2 days mentioned in Hosea prophetically means 2,000 years that would go from the first coming to the second coming. So now in the second year represents, I repeat, the second coming, the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth. That's why this revelation has to do with the end times. So other than that, the fact that the king of Babylon is having dreams shows a couple things: a connection with Pharaoh in Egypt when he had dreams, and Yahweh started doing a bunch of things for the world and his people, mainly starting from that moment when Yahweh gave the king dreams. So now it's happening again. So then we also see a connection between Joseph, who interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh in Egypt, and now a connection with Daniel, who is about to interpret the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. Hopefully it's not a spoiler, but I would guess everybody knows this story. Hopefully. If not, you're in for a treat. So, like we saw in the first chapter, there is a clear connection between Joseph and Daniel, and we are seeing it once again here. And that shows how Daniel represents the second coming, the second manifestation of Yahweh on earth, as one of the 2 witnesses, basically the witness like Moshe, because of the fact that he is like Joseph, he is interpreting dreams. Also, this shows something that is very interesting. One thing that scripture tells us is that Yahweh is the one who sets the kings on their thrones. Anybody in the world who has any authority receives that authority from the Almighty, no matter what kind of authority, and even if it's an evil person, because if Yahweh placed them on that authority, on that place of authority, is because of those under him who have sinned and therefore will go through pain or whatever affliction that bad authority may cause them. So Yahweh, since he saw that the people of Israel were sinning, as he prophesied that they would, Yahweh brought Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Well, he placed them on the throne of Babylon, which became the world empire of the moment, and he made Nebuchadnezzar go to Israel and destroy the temple and punish Israel. So even though it was being something very negative in the sense of what Israel was experiencing, it was because of the will of the Almighty, because of the sins of the people. We could say because of the sins of the people, the consequence was that an evil king entered and destroyed the temple and took the people to Babylon. Just like back in the day, Israel entered Egypt and ended up being slaves, as it was, pretty much promised or prophesied to Abraham. And it happened. But like I have said also, that time of slavery in Egypt was just a shadow of the time of slavery in the end times that has just passed, thankfully, to the Most High, the past pretty much 400, 500 years. Since in Egypt, Israel was not in slavery for more than 150 years. It's actually less than that of slavery. I want to make that clear. So, that's a story for another day. I'll continue with this. So now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, represents the end times 2,000 years after the first coming, when Babylon, the great whore of Babylon, is reigning spiritually through the false doctrines that are in the world, as we see in the book of Revelation. So it says, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. As I was saying, since Yahweh is the one that places kings on their thrones, and Yahweh uses them to pretty much fulfill his will on earth through those kings, even the kings of the nations. Since those kings were given such authority, then Yahweh, who pretty much follows his own rules, he reveals to those kings, to those basically authorities, whatever they may be called, Yahweh gives them dreams, gives them revelations, gives them visions, but not necessarily will those visions be understood by the king. And that is why we always see a Yahudi close to the king who shows him what the Almighty is actually telling the king. So the Almighty may reveal everything to a king because of the position of that king, but because of the evil of that king or the sins of that king, he's pretty much so dirty spiritually that he's not able to see or understand what the vision that he's being given really means. So that's why he has to come to a Yahudi who is set apart and is close to the true mighty one, the Elohim Yahweh, and therefore he's able to interpret what Yahweh is saying. So it is pretty interesting to show how even if Yahweh shows the king everything, the king may not understand it. And that's why Yahweh would exalt a person who was pretty much very humble and who was not in the limelight nor on a throne specifically. But Yahweh would raise him up from wherever he was and put him in a place of honor because he was able to give wisdom to the king. So that's how it happened with Joseph, who was in jail, and now how it happened with Daniel, who was taken pretty much captive, but because of his wisdom, he was one of the wise men of the king. So I'll continue. Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. Chaldeans was pretty much a synonym for wise men, but were the people that lived in that place, called also Babylon. So then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. 4 types of people, as in the 4 corners of the earth, representing that since he was the king of the world, because that was the world empire of the moment, he was able to bring the wisest men from the whole world. Also of the 4 levels of interpretation, the 4 levels of creation, and also of impurity, as in these people, magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, just like the ones in Egypt, who were unable to interpret anything for the Pharaoh. The same thing is about to happen right here. So, just a second. All right. So it says, then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. My spirit is anxious to know the dream. The word, it's also translated as anxious to understand the dream. In Hebrew is to know that, to have knowledge of what that dream means. So, verse 4. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, which was the tongue of the Chaldeans, which is interesting because it's the first tongue to have come out of the original tongue, Hebrew, when the 70 languages came out of the original one back in Babel because of the rebellion of Nimrod and his people, which was the origin of Babel, which became Babylon, which we are now reading hundreds of years later. Of course, want to make that clear. So the origin of Babylon is actually Babel. In Hebrew is Babel. So Babel was formed by Nimrod, who rebelled against the Most High back in Genesis. And he represents the beast, the first beast of Revelation 13, the little horn of the book of Daniel, as we will read on other studies. So, also, well, the point, because of the Aramaic language, is that many people claim that when Mashiach came, he was speaking Aramaic, and that was the language that they were speaking, and that is not true. There are many reasons why, even with the scriptures and other historic writings, that we can know that Mashiach came speaking in Hebrew, and those around him spoke in Hebrew, even though there were a lot of people that were speaking Aramaic already. Because ever since the exile in Babylon, as scripture also tells us, half of the population of Israel came back speaking Aramaic, but the other half continued speaking Hebrew, and that maintained all the way till the Greek Empire, when they basically prohibited from pronouncing the name and added the vowel points to the letters in order not to lose the Hebrew pronunciation, because it was getting less and less known pretty much. So 150 years later, Mashiach comes. He comes speaking Hebrew. Over his cross, it is written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, showing that those were the three main languages. The Hebrew for the Yahudim who were sacrificing Yahushua, the Greek of the empire that was just losing his power, like right when Rome entered and took power. So the Greek Empire was getting forgotten pretty much, but that was the language that was being used. Now the Roman Empire was starting, so they were introducing the Latin language. So that's why above the head of Mashiach was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. So it shows that it was Hebrew. Then we see that when Yahushua appeared to Paul, Shaul, he spoke to him in Hebrew. So there are several things that we see in scriptures, and unfortunately some people, some translators, where it says Hebrew in the original, they have written Aramaic as if it was the same, because of the very close proximity between those languages, because they are very alike in several things, but mainly the fact that they use the same alphabet. So there are many opinions regarding when Aramaic became a language and what it represents and a bunch of other things. It is said that it is spoken by the demons, that the demons speak in Aramaic, and just that is suspicious. But the point is that Aramaic was the first language that came out of the Hebrew, and then 69 more languages were formed during the Tower of Babel. So now we are reading that they were in Babel, which is pretty much what had been prophesied in a way by the Babel of Nimrod. So what I'm trying to say is that the many shadows that scripture tells us or shows us in the Old Testament, for instance, Babel, Nimrod, represented the Babylon that is now in the power of Nebuchadnezzar, and they both represent the great whore of Babylon that would conquer the world through the falsehood that he would teach, as in confusion, which is the meaning of Babel or Babylon. So that's why it's important to see also how the Aramaic language is found, like throughout the scriptures, is found the most in the book of Daniel. Like Daniel has pretty much a chapter in Aramaic and other parts that are in Aramaic. So the rest is Hebrew. Maybe one or two words in one or other, like couple books, one or two words that are or are said to be Aramaic, but the whole scripture is Hebrew. In Daniel, we find some Aramaic because of where it was written, and because it is said that Nebuchadnezzar actually wrote part of it, little part, when he converted. So that will be for later. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision. I'm sorry, I went ahead. Verse 4. The Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Like I said, it's interesting that some say that demons speak Aramaic, and we are seeing here that Nebuchadnezzar, as the king of confusion, Babel, called his magicians, his sorcerers, the astrologers, and the Chaldeans. They were all practicing things that the Torah tells us not to. Even though, like I want to make something clear, the scripture shows us how Yahweh placed the stars in the firmament for a reason, as signs and many other things. But one thing is to come to know or study what they are created for, and another is to try and see the future through those things, and trying to basically find your destiny through the stars instead of doing it through the will of the Father. As I always explain, those who are with Yahweh are above the destiny found in the stars. That's why we have nothing to do with them regarding what the stars tell us, because the stars do say or show what is going to happen. However, in the reality that is temporal, the earthly reality, when Yahweh told Abraham to count the stars, among other things, Abraham saw that he wasn't going to have children according to what it was written on the stars. But Yahweh gave him a higher destiny, if I may call it that, through his promise of giving him the son Yitzhak. That's why his name was changed, so that his future would be changed. So that's why Yahweh tells us in Jeremiah 10 that we shouldn't worry about what the stars tell us, because it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with the nations. So even though the nations may fear it because they see what is coming for them who are idolaters pretty much, we shouldn't, because our destiny is that of the one that Yahweh promised Abraham, which is above the stars. So I want to make that clear. But we can study what the stars represent, mean, and things like that, why Yahweh created them, so that we may know the signs. But we shouldn't follow the astrologers who end up trying to see the future, or try and make money fooling people, telling them their supposed destiny. Because many people don't even read the stars, they just make it up, whatever they tell their clients. So magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, they came speaking Aramaic as if they were serving demons. That's why they would speak that language. That's why they would practice those things. So, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. They were sure they would be able to give the interpretation. This is something important to see also when it comes to interpreting dreams and what we see in scriptures. Their pride, their ego would tell them, if the king tells you, you are so wise that you'll be able to interpret the dream. If the king tells you what he dreamt, then you'll be able to interpret it. That's what the pride in them would tell them. So they were sure they would interpret it. O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a ash heap. So, The king, in this case, is telling them that they are supposed not only to interpret the dream but also to tell the dream. So they are supposed to figure out what he dreamt and then interpret it, which is seen by what we read earlier when he said, I have had a dream and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. So he actually didn't know the dream. He had a dream, but he forgot it, as it usually happens. So he had a dream that he knew was important, but he was anxious in his spirit because of that dream, as in the spirit understood it, but his conscious mind didn't. So he asked everybody to come and tell him what the dream was and then the interpretation. So the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. So he would burn their houses until they would become ashes, which shows also what they represent. Once again, those who will go to the fire, the lake of fire. Verse 6, however, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. So they weren't paying that much attention, because from the beginning, like I already showed, the king was hoping to hear the actual dream from them, not just the interpretation. The king already told them twice that they are supposed to tell the dream, and they are avoiding that fact because they have no idea how to figure out what he dreamt. Only the Almighty Creator, who actually gave the dream, would be able to tell what the dream was, other than Nebuchadnezzar, and he wasn't saying anything. So they avoid that fact because they don't believe that the king, who is so smart because he is the king according to what they would think, they don't believe that the king would be asking for such a thing. So they answer again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. So they were avoiding the fact that he was asking for the actual dream, not just the interpretation, through saying more words and taking more time and more time, hoping to figure out what to do in this case. So I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you, for you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. So he's pretty much telling them, you are just taking time to be able to figure out a lie in order to fool me. So if you don't tell me, you are going to die. Which shows that he was actually wise. He was seeing that that's what they were trying to do. The original language, as is said in comment here, from Daniel 2 verse 4 through Daniel 7:28 is Aramaic. So from verse 4, which is when they came to speak to him. See? Yeah. From the verse 4 where it says, then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. From then on starts being Aramaic until chapter 7. So that was another comment that I wanted to see. Comment D. Just says situation. So, for you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the situation has changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. So the king, since the dream was so important that it caused his spirit to be anxious, he knew that the only way for him to believe in the interpretation that he would be given was if the same person would tell the dream. So if the person would tell him what he dreamt, is because that person had such access to knowledge and wisdom that he would be able to interpret it the perfect way. So the Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter," which once again shows their pride. Since they were unable, they discarded every single person in the world. So if they couldn't do it, they thought nobody could. And that's once again showing their pride. Even though what they're saying is in part wise. Because it is true, no human could do it without the help of his creator. But his creator reveals everything through man. So that was the problem that they had, that they didn't know the true Elohim. Only angels. And angels did not have that access. So the Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean." So that's why they were like not getting the point, because they were like, there's no way that he can be asking us such a thing, because no king ever has asked anything like that. So just a second. So it says then, verse 11, "It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except," it says here in this translation, "the gods. And there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." In Hebrew, or in this case Aramaic, verse 11, let me see if I find it. Yeah, it says Elohim. Just want to make sure that that is the word, because it's pretty much Elohim but with a nun instead of a mem. So only the Elohim would be able. So this is important also, because they are recognizing that only the creator could do so. But since they were Babylonians, they believe in many Elohim. That's why they said the gods. Also, the fact that it says whose dwelling is not with flesh, because, well, as we know, regarding the flesh is where the inclination to do evil dwells, and that is pretty much evil in itself. So that's why there's a separation between the spirit and the flesh. That's why Mashiach tells us that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. That's why we must be transformed or resurrected, depending on the case. So important how they are not able to do it, to interpret the dream or tell the dream. But as we know, because of the book, there is one who will be able. So that shows that Daniel represents the Almighty in the flesh, the Almighty within humanity. Like Yahweh tells us in Isaiah, "I am the first, and I myself will be with the last." With the last. So just like he manifested as Yahushua in the flesh 2,000 years ago, they rejected him, killed him. He also says that he will manifest in the end times with those who would be in the end times. He would manifest among them as the last, the second coming, represented in this case by Daniel. So it is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the Elohim, whose dwelling is not with flesh. For this reason the king was angry and very furious, and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. They had no idea what was happening, but they were looking for them to kill them. This shows how in the end times, the enemy will try to kill the chosen, but he won't be able. Yahweh will stop him before, or basically, will save the few before the beast can kill them. So it says, so the decree went out and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Verse 14. Then, with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Let me see this name for an instant. And as you guys know, you can write all the questions you like, and I'll check them out as soon as I'm done with the chapter. This is the verse. Okay. Arioch means lion-like. In Hebrew, Ariel is lion. And the kaf is a letter that is before words when, like for instance, well, this is a kaf by the way. And it's like saying, well, you can barely see it. It's like a backwards C. So the kaf appears as a preposition when, for instance, like the word Navi, Ka Moshe, or Ki Moshe, would be the prophet like Moshe. The kaf before Moshe makes it like Moshe. Depending on how you pronounce it, is like the or like. So, like Moshe, with a kaf before Moshe. So in this case, Arioch is Ariel pretty much, with a kaf at the end, Arioch, and that means like a lion, even though the kaf is at the end though. So, like a lion. As we know, in the positive sense, the tribe of Yehudah is represented by the lion. And as we read in Revelation, Yahushua, the root of David, is the lion of Yehudah. But he came as the lamb. So the manifestation of the lion happens through the Ruach that he sends with his messenger, Michael, the second coming, the prophet like Moshe, the witness, one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11. So, Arioch in positive sense could be the spirit sent by Yahushua to help Daniel while it is bringing judgment to the world. Or in the negative sense, we know Satan is like a lion, Arioch, who goes around looking who he may devour. So, right now, Babylon, which is represented by the lion also, was killing the wise men through this man, the captain, who was called lion-like. So we know Satan goes like a lion, trying to destroy mainly the wise men, because those who are fools are already working for him without knowing, because they're fools. So he goes for the wise men to destroy them, represented by Arioch. So it says, then with counsel and wisdom Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time, that he might tell the king the interpretation. So Daniel shows what pretty much Yahushua tells us to do, to love our enemy. And I say that because Daniel, he could have waited and let the king kill all the wise men who were pagans, and therefore spiritual enemies, and just go and interpret for him and his 3 friends and save just themselves. However, he tells the king to stop killing anybody, even though they would eventually come against him, against Daniel, because of jealousy and other things. So Daniel tells them to stop and don't kill the wise men until he comes with the interpretation. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. We see here that Daniel, still being called by his true name, his Hebrew name, even though he was given a different name. So Arioch was calling him something different, but his name is kept in Hebrew because it is the true name, because it is the true language, because there is more power, and many other reasons. So he goes and tells his friends, who appear also with the Hebrew names, and made decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the Elohim of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So we see Daniel's faith. He was not having faith in himself, nor his wisdom. He wasn't being prideful. He was actually being merciful, hoping to save his friends and the rest of the wise men in Babylon. So he's not being prideful. He's being hopeful that Yahweh will be so merciful as he is to reveal to him this matter, because if not, they would die. So even though he tells the king that he will interpret it in faith, he goes to his friends and tells them, yo, we need to interpret it. So let's pray. Because he knew that it wasn't according to his wisdom or his strength spiritually. It was according to the will of the Most High, and therefore they would have to go to him. Just like the king was making all the wise men come to him and then decided to kill them, Daniel goes to the King of Kings to ask for his salvation by getting the revelation of the dream that the king had had. So Daniel went in and asked the king to give, already said that. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the Elohim of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. The secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So we see the authority that is given to Daniel, because he's pretty much having the same dream that the king had. Just like Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh and ended up pretty much getting his job. So even though Pharaoh was the one that everybody honored the most in Egypt, Joseph was the one who actually deserved that honor, because of the fact that he was the one who had the wisdom, who had all the knowledge of languages. He actually had one language more than the Pharaoh, and that meant that Joseph was the one who should have ruled. So there are many reasons regarding the Pharaoh in the sense of the earthly, who was evil, but in the spiritual, heavenly interpretation, that king represents the King of Kings. So Joseph pretty much Mashiach, as in the second to the throne, and also as first and last, just in case. So then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the Elohim of heaven. And let me see how it appears here. Alright. Baruch le'elah shamaya. He blessed Baruch. Well, it says actually Barich. Baruch would be in Hebrew. So I'm just doing that to show how close it is to Hebrew. It says here Barich instead of Baruch. It says le'elah instead of le'el or Eloah, and Shemaya instead of Shamaim. So verse 20. So Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of Elohim forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. We see Daniel's fear of Yahweh, which makes him wise in order to recognize that that wisdom only comes from the only Elohim, Yahweh. We see how humble he is. He never took it as, I knew it that I would get the dream because I am Daniel. Nothing like that. He realizes that everything that he receives, for which he will get gifts and honors and many other things, everything comes from the Most High. So blessed be the name of Elohim forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. It's interesting that it is written in Aramaic. They are in Babylon. And the name is not being mentioned here. Just like Aramaic was a language that entered in order to start destroying or getting rid of the pronunciation of the name and many other things. So blessed be the name of Elohim forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Just like in the book of Esther, the name of Yahweh doesn't appear. That is to show that in the end times, they would hide the name. They would make people avoid using the name or forbid them from using it. Let me see. Elaha. So blessed be the name of Elohim forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. What we were saying earlier, he removes kings and raises up kings. He is the one that does everything. As it said also, he changes the times and the seasons. He is the one that fulfills everything. Even through the creations that he made, just like, for instance, the sun and the moon and the stars, to have to do with the seasons, like he said in Genesis. But he is the one given the power, the Shefa, in order for those things to work and keep on existing. So he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise. So whoever is wise, he's getting that wisdom from Yahweh. Even if that person doesn't know who Yahweh is. Obviously, if that person doesn't know who Yahweh is, his wisdom either is earthly and therefore diabolical, or is just an illusion, or is not that great because he hasn't come to know the one who gives the wisdom. And what I mean by that is that the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. So you must know who you fear in order to receive that wisdom. However, if you, for instance, love your neighbor as yourself, even though you don't know Yahweh, that is a type of fear of Yahweh, because you're doing what Yahweh is telling you to do, because you are. And what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to the name, like not everybody has the name, not everybody knows the name, but many people claim to believe in him, and many people, or some, try to fulfill his commandments. So when we put our effort in fulfilling his commandments, is because we fear him, as in we honor him, we respect him, and we want to obey him. So when we act that way, we act in wise, in a very wise way. If you do anything differently than what the commandments tell us to do, then you're acting foolishly. So that is my point regarding even somebody who may not know the Almighty by his name may receive wisdom through the fulfillment of his commandments, because it also is written in scriptures also that the fulfillment of the commandment makes us wise. When we actually fulfill a commandment and see what that commandment does to us, the goodness that it brings, then we realize how wise it is to fulfill it. So He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. Light dwells with him. This is very interesting. It doesn't say, and he is light. No, it says light dwells with him. He is above it. Just like, for instance, it is shown when Yahweh created everything, and on the first day he made the light. However, that light was a creation, that of the first day. As we read in Isaiah 45, we see that Yahweh forms the light and creates darkness. So darkness is a creation, and the original light, which is mentioned here, is actually an emanation, has always existed in Yahweh, and at certain point in time, if we could call it that, the beginning of that light emanated from him in order to create everything. And by everything I mean time and space. That's why I could not use the word time for when the light emanated from him. The light is the word through whom Yahweh created everything, because he gives form to light. Therefore, it has always existed. And that is Mashiach, who said, I am the light, the way. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. So Yahushua is the light. That's why the light dwells with him. And that is why Daniel, as a representation of the second coming, is talking to Yahweh and recognizing the Son who is on his right side, the light. I hope that's clear. So Yahushua is the light. That's why Daniel says that the light dwells with him. The light, Yahushua, the light of the world, the spirit of truth, of life, the way, the door, etc. But the point here is that the light is his Son. So, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O Elohim of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might. You have given me wisdom and might. This is also important, because it's mentioned in might, which comes from wisdom and knowledge and understanding, spiritual might, although some might think that it means just physical might, which is also a blessing, as we see with Samson, Shimshon. Is also a blessing, but spiritual might is obviously higher than physical might or power. You have given me wisdom and might. And the word, well, let me see, verse 23, Hebrew. Sorry, Aramaic. Hakmeta, pretty much wisdom. Begevurta, which comes from the Hebrew Gevurah. And Yahweh said that he would manifest in the end times, the last, as the Gibor. Gevurah has to do with the second pillar. There are two pillars in the temple, Yakin and Boaz. Yahushua manifested to fulfill what the pillar Yakin represents. The last, the second coming, comes to fulfill what the pillar Boaz represents. The pillar Yakin is the one through whom we received wisdom, favor, and triumph. We overcome through the first pillar, Yahushua HaMashiach, who gave us the wisdom, the heavenly wisdom, the favor with the Father, and the triumph to overcome over evil, over sin, over the enemy. The second coming brings understanding, Gevurah or might, and the honor or splendor of the king. So Daniel is talking to Yahweh, then referencing the light which is on his right, who is his Son, the first coming, first manifestation, and then he's mentioning the might that he has received to fulfill his mission, and therefore pretty much represents the second coming, the second pillar in which Geburah is found. That's why it mentions Geburah. And the Chokmah, or the wisdom that he's receiving, is receiving it because of the manifestation of Yahushua 2,000 years ago. And also it is prophesied in Isaiah that the last would receive pretty much a double portion of wisdom, just like Mashiach offered pretty much that double portion when he said that those who would come afterwards would do greater things than what he did. So, as I was saying, he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O Elohim of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. Look how even when he's praying, when he's the one that received the dream, he's including his friends, because he knows that he received the dream also because of the prayers that they sent to the Most High. So he could have said, and have now made known to me what I asked of you. But he says, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's demand. The king's demand. So, I'm going to see, before continuing, if there are any questions. All right. I see no questions. I'm glad that about that new man found, and it is my pleasure also to have these studies. So to be able to interpret dreams or tongues, you have to be from the same spirit. I don't understand the question. Same spirit as whom? Or what same spirit? I mean, well, to be able to interpret dreams, you have to receive the interpretation from the Most High. Pretty much that's the point of the whole prayer by Daniel. Any wisdom, knowledge, understanding that we may receive comes from the Most High. So we must recognize that in order to receive interpretation of dreams. Not everybody has the ability to interpret dreams, or the gift to be able to transmit that knowledge that Yahweh gives regarding those interpretations. But when it comes to the gifts of the Spirit, of the Ruach HaKodesh given in Shavuot by Yahushua, if that is what you are referring to, the interpretation of dreams is not mentioned, only the interpretation of tongues. Although it's the same Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, but it is not mentioned specifically interpretation of dreams. Just want to make that clear. And the same writing in Corinthians says, the same Spirit that gives tongues is the same Spirit that gives others the interpretation of tongues. There are some people who have both, for instance, tongues and interpretation. But I'm saying that there is a possibility of that happening. Haven't known anybody with it, even though I've seen so many people supposedly speaking in tongues in Christian churches. Let me see other questions. My scripture says Elah when referencing Elohim. Is that correct translation? Yeah, but in the Aramaic, like I said, it is fine, but it is appearing like that because it is in Aramaic. That's why it's a little bit different than the rest. So that you have to have the Ruach of Yahweh and ask Yahweh to give the answers of, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Ruach of Yahweh is the one that will give you all that understanding. But like I was saying, there might be some people, for instance, I'm not saying it's the case, but for instance, those wise men in Babylon who were about to be killed because they couldn't interpret it, they had some wisdom regarding certain areas. So even that wisdom that they had received came from the Almighty. but they didn't recognize him as the giver, which is like when people pray for something, pray to some entity that is not the Almighty, but because of their faith in whatever idol or whatever, because of their strong faith and belief, they are able to change the reality, because Yahweh gave us that power through faith, because we can move mountains if we believe. So when they believe, they are able to move a mountain, and unfortunately they give thanks to Satan pretty much. And that is how many people act always. So we must always recognize that everything that is good, everything that has a purpose, everything that works for something, comes from the Most High, even if a person who claims to be an atheist is the one who said it or invented it or whatever. It is their problem when they face the Almighty, to whom they have given the credit for whatever they received, whether it be that they give credit to their own strength, their own knowledge, their own brains, or whatever entity, as Allah or whatever. So I'll continue. Therefore, verse 24, therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king, and said thus to him, I have found a man. Look how he's now taking credit for finding Daniel, which once again, I repeat, is to show the contrast between the personality of the Babylonians who live in confusion as today's society, and Daniel, who was so humble that he wanted to save the evil magicians, sorcerers, and Chaldeans, and astrologers. And he included his friends when it came to the revelation that he received as part of the reason why he received it. So there's a huge contrast between the Yahudim as Daniel and the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, as today's society, I repeat. So I have found a man of the captives of Yahudah who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar. As I was saying, the name Daniel remains the same because it is the original, because it's Hebrew, because it's the most powerful, because names matter when it comes to the set apart ones. So since it is written in Aramaic, now he's talking to the king, then we are given once again the name that he had received in order to be able to connect the first chapter with this. So the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded. This is important. Once again, we see his humility. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is an Elohim in heaven who reveals secrets. But there is a mighty one in heaven who reveals secrets. Elah, as appear in the translation of the brother. So, but there is an Elah in heaven, a mighty one, who reveals secrets. And he has made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. So Daniel, being so wise, is actually seen, his wisdom is seen through his words, through the way he would talk to the king and to people, and to the Almighty, of course. So he's telling him that Yahweh gave the king the revelation of the end times. Daniel could have said once again, and the Almighty has given me the interpretation of the dream that you had. But no, he's saying, but the Almighty gave you, the king, the revelation of the end times. So I repeat that part. But there is an Elohim in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed. So Daniel, it's so amazing what Yahweh revealed to him, because Daniel not only received the dream and the interpretation, but also pretty much a vision of what was happening with the king in his chamber at night, hidden from everybody in his palace. Not only that, Yahweh showed Daniel what was happening in the head, in the mind, in the heart of the king. So it goes up like way farther from what the king was expecting. It's amazing how much we can receive from the Most High if we believe, if we look for him. So as for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. So the king was going to bed, and he started thinking what would happen after he died. What would happen with the kingdom? What would happen with the world? Since he was a king, he was the king of the world. He was thinking what would be the future of the world that he was ruling after him. So since he is a king, and he was wondering, the creator who made him king revealed it to him, which shows also the power of the king, in the sense of what the power that Yahweh gives the king to access knowledge and wisdom and revelation, since the king is a representation of the one who reveals. So it says, but as for me, well, just a second. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living. But for our sakes, this is amazing. Once again, Daniel could have stopped there, but no, because he is set apart. He is humble. He's a servant of Yahweh. He's making sure that he uses this opportunity to show the true creator who he is, what he does, and who are his people. So, but as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living. So he's saying, I didn't receive this just because I'm smarter or whatever, or greater or better than anybody else, which is something that anybody would have done or believed if they had received this. That's why nobody did. Only Daniel, who was the only who was prepared spiritually and mentally to receive such a revelation, and not pretty much end up being like the Pharisees or Lucifer, because of the greatness that Yahweh was giving him. So, but as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living. But for our sakes, who make known the interpretation to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. So Daniel is saying, Yahweh gave me this interpretation so that you may know. It's not because I am special. It's not because of anything else other than because Yahweh wants you to know. You are the king. You wanted to know, so I was sent to tell you. Which is interesting, because let me see, in Isaiah 45, I'm going to read real quick, and it's not the only chapter actually in the prophets that says something like this. Let me see. Yeah, just a second. Just a second. Well, in the one that I was talking about in Isaiah 45, when it says, let me see. Verse 3, I will give you the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that I, Yahweh, who called you by your name, am the Elohim of Israel. So showing how to the last Yahweh is going to give the hidden things. And in other chapters we see how Yahweh will use the last to reveal to the, and that would be Isaiah 52 at the end. Behold, my servant shall deal prudently. He shall be exalted and extolled and be very high. Just as many were astonished at you, so his visage was marred. Well, just a second. Yeah, verse 15. So, Isaiah 52 verse 15. So shall he. The verse 13 shows or represents the first coming. Actually, the 13 represents the second coming. Verse 14 represents the first coming. And then verse 15 continues with the second coming, or what would the one mentioned in verse 13 will do. So shall he sprinkle many nations with the blood of the Lamb. Pretty much one of the interpretations. Kings shall shut their mouths at him. Kings, as Nebuchadnezzar, as Pharaoh before Joseph. Kings shall shut their mouths at him. For what had not been told to them, they shall see. For what had not been told them, they shall see. And what they had not heard, they shall consider. So we see that Yahweh sends Mashiach first and last to do what we see Joseph and Daniel doing. To show that it is Yahweh who has the wisdom, the knowledge, and the power, not whatever king may be on whatever throne on this earth, until the time when he himself will enter the flesh and sit on the throne as the king of all creation. So, going back to Daniel. So it was saying, verse 20, let me see, verse 30. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me, because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes, who make known the interpretation to the king. So Yahweh gave the interpretation so that the king wouldn't kill everybody, and so that the king would know what happened, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. Verse 31. You, O king, it's interesting also the thoughts of your heart, and Daniel is the one revealing everything, because David, who had a heart like that of Yahweh, shows the connection of the king with the heart, and how the revelation comes to it. So Daniel is as a representation of the heart of the king. Therefore, like David, being the king Yahweh, the heart, the earthly king, the brain, the Kohen Gadol. So the point is, the congregation, the few are the body, the many are the blood. The first is the brain, and the last is the heart. And that's how everything comes together, or everybody. So verse 31. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. A great image. This is important, because Nebuchadnezzar, by being the king of Babylon, the kingdom of the world at that time, represents the beast of the end times. That's why he's represented by a lion with eagle wings. And we see those two representations also regarding the beast of Revelation. So Nebuchadnezzar represents the world leader, the first beast, the little horn, the king of the new world order. So we see in Revelation, and I guess I'm going to go right away, Revelation 13, there are two beasts. One who is the world leader, the other one is the religious leader. And the world leader with the false prophet, they will get together and create an image. So verse 14 of chapter 13 of Revelation says, and he deceives, talking about the second beast, that who is the false prophet, leader of the great whore of Babylon. So, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, in the sight of the world leader. And the main sign that that beast will do is kill the two witnesses. So the fact that the false prophet will be able to kill the two witnesses for the first beast will make the whole world believe in the false prophet and follow whatever they tell him, the beast and the false prophet. So, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. An image to the beast. There are many things that can be said regarding this and what it represents, what it means and everything, but for now, since we will see it more and more in the book of Daniel in the following chapters, for now I just want to make sure that you see the connection between Daniel, the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, and now the beast as Nebuchadnezzar, ready to build an image to be worshipped through it, which is what happens also in Daniel later on. So I'll continue. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold. So imagine the statue of a human being, the head fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. So starts going from the most precious metal to the least precious metal, from the least dense metal to the most dense metal. Therefore, pretty much goes from the metal that represents honor, kingship, which is gold, and then goes to the metal that represents war, destruction, which is iron. Also, at the very end, it is a mix of iron and clay, which, as we know, clay is, compared to metal, is very weak. So there are many reasons why these metals, and well, in this case the clay, are mentioned, and we will see what Daniel has to say regarding it. So this image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Verse 34. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands. I'm feeling like interpreting already, but Daniel is about to start explaining it. Through his explanation, we'll receive a lot more information, so I'll continue. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. We saw that when Daniel started to interpret the dream, he told the king that the king was thinking about the end times, the latter days, and Yahweh revealed to him what would happen. When it comes to the human body in Hebrew, the head is called Rosh, which is also pretty much the origin of the word Reshit, which means beginning, as in Bereshit, in the beginning. So Rosh is the beginning of the body. That's why Yahushua the first came as the head of the congregation. Now the last comes as one of the two witnesses, as one of the 2 feet. Because just as the head represents the beginning, the feet represent the end. So the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw and Daniel is interpreting represents the kingdom that was at the time as the head, and time passing by, going down, changing empires, therefore metals, until getting till the end times, when the 2 feet of iron and clay would appear or be controlling the world. So, just to be clear, we are in the time represented by the feet of this image. So I'll continue. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on his feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found, and the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. So here Daniel is showing, well, with these words, he's saying that Nebuchadnezzar was the king of the earth because all kings answer to him. Therefore, Nebuchadnezzar in the positive, if we could say that sense, represents the Almighty. In the negative, represents the Elohim of this world. Therefore, Hillel. That's why the king of confusion, Babel. It is interesting that Hillel, Lucifer, can only interpret the scriptures because he knows the whole scriptures, but he only interprets the letter. He cannot understand the true interpretation of the words that are written in scriptures. So it's interesting how Nebuchadnezzar, as Hillel, had to ask a man, Daniel, to answer or give him the interpretation of the dream. So, this is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are king of kings. For the Elohim of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and esteem, honor. Has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and honor. Once again, like the 4 letters of the name Yahweh, like the 4 levels of creation: emanation, creation, formation, and action. So, for the Elohim of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and honor. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. So Daniel tells him that he is the king of all the kings of the earth. Like I said, representing the Elohim of this earth, like when Satan appeared before Yahushua to tempt him and told him that he could give him all the kingdoms of the earth because all the kingdoms were given to him in the beginning and he could give them to whoever he wanted. Therefore is as Nebuchadnezzar, king of kings in the sense of this world, this reality, which will pass. I want to make that clear. So that's why it says, and wherever the children of men dwell, which is interesting, is powerful because this also happened with Shlomo, and in the greater sense will happen with Mashiach on the throne for eternity, in which we see how clear, or the fact that Yahweh made everything for the service of men, and men for the service of Yahweh. So everything is connected to men. Obviously, I mean humans, right? Male and female. Everything in the world, everything that was created is connected to humans. And humans were made to serve Yahweh. That's why they are made in his image. And just like the angels serve Yahweh when it comes to the creation, the animals were made in the image of the animals, and that's why they serve the man, who is the image of the Creator. So, the head of gold is Babylon, is the kingdom of Babylon. He had the head of gold because he was very, how could I call it? like it's saying here, power, strength, and honor. It was very, very honorable, I guess, but in the sense that I say I guess because it's Babylon, and I don't believe has any honor when it comes to the spirit, but when it comes to the physical, it was a, they say, beautiful thing to see. It was very, very like gold, pretty much what gold represents, and the reason why many people use gold. That's why gold was used to represent that kingdom. So when we compare the kingdom of Babylon to the kingdom of Rome, it's as comparing gold and iron. One is beautiful and is used as basically adornment, as something to look better and seem honorable and seem powerful. And then there's one that is used to cut down trees, to make weapons, to kill, to destroy. So we see how the empires of the world went from bad to worse. Because even though it's gold, and gold isn't bad, when it comes to the physical of how people use gold or love gold, that is negative. What gold can cause when a person doesn't have the Almighty. Because of the love of money is the root of all evil. So when they love the gold, they become evil and confused as Babylon. So, just like Shlomo, just like we're seeing here, not only all people are given into the hand of the authority of this king, but all animals. Animals know it. They see the spiritual world in many cases, so they can see the honor that Yahweh gives the king, so they respect and honor the king. When a person doesn't believe in anything spiritual or whatever, they could not understand that or see any way that could be possible. But there are, for instance, like I always say, Selassie, who is worshipped pretty much by Rastas, the Rastafarians, and they shouldn't. But one of the reasons why they follow him is because he all seems to point to him being a righteous person, and he was king. He had authority, and the lions would respect him and treat him well. So that is to show how the kingship given by the heavens is respected and honored by the animals even. So then it says, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, as silver to gold. Then another third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So, the head of gold is Babylon. The chest and arms of silver is the Medes and the Persians. That's why two arms, because he's separated in two. The belly of bronze is the Greek Empire, and then iron is the Roman Empire. So Yahweh showed Nebuchadnezzar through Daniel all the kingdoms that would come till the end of times, exactly as they happen. So it's also important to see what iron does, because we see many times, and I will read a couple of them, and this is very important, because when we get to Daniel 7, actually Daniel 9, we will see a revelation that is very different than what is taught in most Christian denominations, if not all. And this that I'm about to say or show is key to understand what we will see in Daniel 9. I'll still mention it again anyways, but in Psalm 2:9 says, "You shall break them with a rod of iron." Although this could be taken as Yahweh will use Rome to destroy the enemy. Part of the enemy is Rome. So Rome itself has to be destroyed. So even though it could be interpreted historically as Yahweh using Rome to punish, when we read in context, everything that has to do with what I'm about to read has to do with Yahweh manifesting on earth as a king who has a rod of iron, meaning who will do justice on earth pretty much in a hard way for those who are evil, using their own way of acting. So, just like the Romans would do, Yahweh will manifest in the end times to do justice with a rod of iron, meaning like the Romans. Because just like Yahushua came through Israel, and he came for the lost tribes, the last comes as one of the lost tribes, reason why he's thought to be a Gentile. Like Paul, who was a Hebrew genetically, but a Roman in paper. So will happen with the last. Since he comes from Ephraim, one of the lost tribes, he grows up as a Gentile, as a Roman, as we see in Isaiah 63 also. In Isaiah 63 we see that the second coming, he will appear as a Roman. Even though he will come as a Hebrew, he is a Hebrew genetically, but a Roman to the people. To the people that will see him, they will say that he's a Gentile. That's why Yahushua also said that he would come as a thief in the night. And that's why also the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son, and also that is why we see that they wrote in Hebrew, in Greek, and in Latin, which is the language of the Roman Empire. So that meant that the first coming, he came as a Hebrew. Then because of the Greek apostasy, he would grow as a Roman on the second coming. I hope that's clear. So that's why it says, you shall break them, meaning Yahweh coming as the last, as king. Since Yahushua came to forgive our sins, the last comes to punish those who did not accept the first. So you shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Revelation 2:27. He, meaning he who overcomes. The one from Revelation 6:1 and 2, who unfortunately Christians interpret that is the Antichrist, not understanding. That is the second coming. That's why he is the one that conquers, goes conquering and to conquer, meaning he wins. If that was the Antichrist, that is a big problem. He wins. And the fact that he conquers means that he overcomes, which is pretty much in the original language the same word, but in English they changed them. So he conquers, meaning he overcomes. Revelation 2:27, Yahushua is talking about the one who overcomes, and it says, he shall rule them with a rod of iron, like a Roman, a king with a rod of iron. They, the evil, the rebellious, they shall be dashed to pieces like a potter's vessel, which is the fulfillment of Psalm 2:9. As I also have received from my Father. So just like Mashiach received something, the last will receive it, and then they will become one, as we see also in other parts of scriptures. Revelation 12:5. She bore a male child, the congregation of the end times, just like the virgin Miriam gave birth literally to Yahushua HaMashiach. Now the fulfillment of that happens spiritually, because the congregation as a virgin will give birth to the last, because Yahweh said, I am the first and I will be with the last. So she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to Elohim and his throne. That is in Revelation, well, this is Revelation 12:5, but that moment when he's caught up is in Revelation 11, when he resurrects and is taken up in a cloud, just like Yahushua in Acts 1. Revelation 19:15, to confirm it, now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, meaning the word of Yahweh, and the word of Yahweh is the Son Yahushua HaMashiach. So that means that The spirit of the first comes through the mouth of the last, meaning the first and last are one, just like Yahushua said, the Father and I are one. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations. And he himself will rule them, the nations, with a rod of iron. Just like Joseph, when he interpreted the dreams for the Pharaoh, became the king of the world, because he's the one that fed the whole world. Because there were 7 years of the fat cows and 7 years of the sick, skinny ones. And those 7 years, which represent the last 7 years of humanity, the last 7 years, the week of Daniel, are the 7 years that Joseph reigned over the world, and now are being represented also by Daniel, interpreting the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar, and doing everything that comes in the rest of the book, which is pretty much the revelation of the Old Testament, meaning the book of Revelation of the Old Testament would be the book of Daniel, as we will see many connections between both of them. So, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of Almighty Yahweh. So, going back to Daniel. Verse, let me see what verse. You watch, okay. So, you watch while a stone, already read that, verse 36, I think. Yeah, verse 36. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are king of kings, for the Elohim of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and honor. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall rise another kingdom, the Persians, inferior to yours. Then, and that is to show also that, just like the metals, history, just like everything in this reality, I mean, anything, you can buy something that is completely new, set it aside and never use it, and after a couple years it won't be the same, just because of the environment, just because everything in this reality decays. So just like every object, everything that has matter decays, so does time, because time and space were a creation for matter to exist within it and have a time. So time itself is breaking down, if you want to put it like that, is decaying, because we're coming to the end. So just like everything decays in this reality, so did humans, the kingship, wisdom, and everything else. So that's why, even though Babylon was a negative kingdom compared to the kingdoms that came after, it was great. It was the best. So that would mean that before Babylon there was one that was better, before that one there was something that was better, and I mean the time before that. That's why Shlomo said that there is never wisdom in the question, why are the times worse than before? Why nowadays the times are so bad when compared to back in the day? There's never wisdom in that question, because it is just logical. That's how it works. That's why right now, everything that is happening with the coronavirus and with the economy and with the locusts that are eating a bunch of the food in several parts of the world now, hurricanes, earthquakes, homosexuality, and a bunch of other things. So it's just a sign that we are in the end of the creation called time. So, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, that is the Greek Empire, which shall rule over all the earth through Alexander the Great. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. Rome, the Roman Empire, was as strong as iron, but it didn't have the honor and splendor that Babylon had. Inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. So we're seeing here the connection with the other part that I was reading in Psalm and Revelation, how the last comes as a Roman, and Yahweh takes him to break in pieces the kings of the earth and destroy the nations that do not accept the Almighty, pretty much, as king. So that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. That's how Rome has acted ever since its creation. Then it became the papacy, so it hid behind the priesthood, but behind closed doors, still controlling a bunch of the destruction that happens in the world for gain and for many other reasons, control and whatever. So verse 41, whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. This is very important, this verse. The kingdom shall be divided. So the easy interpretation, or the literal, well, actually the literal will be very clear and not as easy, but the easy interpretation of this, and what I mean is what most people would actually see in here and explain about it, is that just like Yahushua said that a house divided will fall. So when they were saying that he was casting out Satan, being himself possessed by a demon, made no sense. It made no sense, Satan fighting himself. So that's why Yahushua is telling them, if that was the case, then we know that his kingdom has already fallen because he's divided. So Yahushua was showing how he was actually the Almighty, taking out evil from this world, yet people were actually seeing him as evil for doing so, which is amazing. That's how evil people were. And if they were that evil 2,000 years ago, and as I already said, as time works in generations, and this reality, imagine how bad this generation is regarding the thoughts of their hearts, what they think of the Almighty, what they think of the scriptures, what they think of Mashiach, etc. And what they would think of the two witnesses. They will hate the two witnesses so much because of that fact that they just speak the truth and people don't like the truth anymore. They rather have political correctness and a bunch of other things. And since politicians lie all the time, then that means that being politically correct means lying just to please people and get their vote. So it is very sad that that is the time in which we are living, but it's very great in the sense that it means we are approaching eternity. We are approaching the actual life that won't decay. So whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. So that means it's going to fall. Since gold was so great, and then it started going down, silver, which is less precious, then Greece, then Rome, which was very strong, but in the end times it became very weak because it became divided. And there are many reasons or ways in which that happened, or how it could be interpreted, but I will continue. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it. So the kingdom of the end times, the new world order, will have the strength of Rome. So he uses Rome for that strength. That's why the beast of Revelation 13 uses Rome, the false prophet, to control the world, because Rome has that strength over the world. Now spiritually, is controlling the minds of a third of the world who are or claim to be Catholics. Well, and a third, I mean also with a bunch of others that may not claim to be Catholics, but Christians who will eventually go back to Catholicism, or at least the religion of the world that will be formed through it. So, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. So because of that division and because of the two substances that form this kingdom, it will have strength, but also a very weak part, a fragile part. Like society itself nowadays, they are so fragile that they cannot hear the truth, that they have to be politically correct. That is so sad that they are using the excuse of racism to, as they call it, cancel a bunch of things, showing actually themselves as racist when they claim that objects or images, which and I mean of products and stuff like that, they're taking out logos and stuff like that because they claim it is racist. But the racism is in their hearts and their eyes when they see something and claim that is hateful towards somebody. It is an object. The hate comes from that person's perspective. So it is so sad that there's so many people claiming to be such humanist and loving people and accepting people, but they are showing through their actual arguments that they are very racist and they are very hateful. So, anyways, the society nowadays is like this. But what Daniel is trying to tell us is something even higher than that, or deeper. So it says, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle. Listen. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. The seed of men is the sperm. So, if they will mingle with the seed of men, then who are they? Because they are not men, since they are mingling with the seed of men. So there are a couple things to see here. First of all, Yahushua told us that the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah. When we go to the days of Noah, we read that the angels came down and had sex with the women, the daughters of Adam. They mixed with them and they had children to the angels, and those children became giants. The Nephilim in Hebrew, the Nephilim, who happened to be really huge in size, but they were called Nephilim, fallen ones. So the angels came down and mixed with the women, and there were some creatures that were formed in that time by using the women. And those creatures started ruling the earth and destroying humanity, and that's why Yahweh sent the flood to destroy them, because they were corrupting humanity by teaching them to sin in greater ways than they knew already. So, as the days of Noah, so shall it be the days of the Son of Man. So we are reading here, first of all, just like Noah would go and preach, so the Son of Man. People, for some reason, they just don't take into account that specific fact. If Yahushua said that the coming of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah, Noah was on earth and he was preaching and he was preparing an ark for his family. So that means that the Son of Man comes and he will preach and he will prepare a place for his people, the chosen few. But they don't take that in account, and it's very sad how they interpret scriptures when it is actually clear, thanks to the Most High, when we read it carefully and obviously through the spirit of the Son, Yahushua. So, just like in the days of Noah, angels mixed with men, with the women, to create the Nephilim, so shall be in the days of the Son of Man, when the kingdom of the end, the feet, would be a mix of iron, which represents the angels, and clay, which represents humans, because we were made of clay. We were made using the dust of the earth mixed with a little bit of water, and then Yahweh Elohim gave form to our bodies. Well, to the body of Adam, and then gave the soul, and then he started multiplying. The point is, as it is written also, that the body of the humans is made of dust, and then it returns to dust when he dies. That's why people are buried. So men are made of clay. That's what the seed of man is being represented by here, by the clay. And the iron represents the angels. When it comes to Rome, there is a story regarding the origin of Rome. Romulus, for instance, the two brothers who were taken care of by a she-wolf, according to the mythology or the story, but some say that they were actually sons of a whore, represented by that she-wolf. And some say that she had sex with the god of war, that Mars, which is Samael. And that is how she had the twins, who became the rulers, or well, one of them, the one who created Rome. So that she-wolf or whore represents the great whore of Babylon coming through Rome. And according to that story, or one of the stories, the twins, children of this woman, they would be Nephilim, according to one of the stories, because they were sons of the god of war. According to some books also, if I'm not mistaken, one of them by Josephus, he says that from one of the sons of Esau, which we see also in the book of Yashar, so there is truth to this fact. But in the middle, an angel could have come down and have sex with a woman for Rome to be started. So that is a possibility, because it happened back in the day, so it can happen, because Yahweh said that there were Nephilim in that time and afterwards. So it is possible for that story to have part of truth. But according to the book of Yashar and other writings, Rome came from Esau, or Edom, the brother of Jacob. That is why in Isaiah 63 we see that Yahweh will come dressed in red from Edom, just like Jacob dressed as Esau to get the blessing. Esau became Edom, that was his nickname. So just like Jacob dressed as Esau to get the blessing from his father, the last will be dressed as a Roman from Edom to get the blessing from the Most High. So clay represents the humans, iron the angels who gave origin, or in this case the angel Samael, who gave origin to Rome. So that would mean that the angels and the humans would mix again in the end times, like in the days of Noah, because they would be like the days of the Son of Man. And there is also a possibility that part of it, or the whole thing, has been happening through what they call abductions. The stories of extraterrestrials taking people, abducting people, and putting babies in females, or taking the sperm from men to mix it up with their whatever matter they're made of, and create what we see in the parable as tares. The wheat and the tares, they would grow together and they would look alike. They would seem to be the same, but in the harvest, one can clearly see the wheat, because it's the one that bows to the ruach that goes over them, but the tare stays straight, as in giving no honor to the spirit, the ruach, the wind. And that's how you realize what are tares and what are wheat, because the weight of the wheat makes it bow, while the tare doesn't. So the wheat and the tares, the two kinds of people that would exist in the end times, represented also here by the tares being iron mixed with clay. So I hope that's clear. And as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of man. That is, it should be clear. With the seed of man. The seed of man is sperm. If they mix with the seed of man, it's because they are not men. So they are something else. And that would be angels. So then it says, But they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. So, because of that division, the kingdom is going to fall. Because of the fact that the beast hates the whore of Babylon, even though they will get together to control the world, they will eventually end up falling. Because they are angels and the other ones are humans. What they are going to do by mixing their genes will actually create their destruction. So it says, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days, this is important also, the whole chapter, but I repeat this because we see so many verses that go against the Christian doctrine. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why they avoid the Old Testament so much. There are so many verses that go against what the Christian pastors teach as absolute truth without showing it in scriptures, only using one or two verses taken out of context. This is one of those. Christians believe that Jesus, as they call their Messiah, will pass over them and take him out of this world during the rapture, and then the 7 years will happen. Some Christians believe that that would happen at the very end. Some believe that it will happen in the middle. Those who believe that it will happen in the middle are the ones that are closer to the truth. However, the rapture, as they teach it, is wrong. So, that is one thing. And in Daniel, we're going to see a bunch of those contradictions with the Christian doctrine. So here's one. Verse 44. And in the days of these kings, he's talking about the 10 toes. Just like the statue represented all the kingdoms and the feet represented the kingdom of the end times, the feet have 10 toes. Each of those toes represents a king that would have control of the world in the end times. We see this later in Daniel also with a beast that has 10 horns. Each of those horns is a king. Out of those 10 horns, a little horn will come out. And when that little horn comes out, which is the beast, 3 of the first horns will be taken away. So there will be 7 horns with the little horn, which represents what we see Micah or Micaiah, the prophet, who says that the last comes with 7 disciples, just like Yahushua the first came with 12. 12 representing the tribes for whom Yahushua came, and 7 representing the nations for whom the last comes to rule them with a rod of iron. So 1 with 7, the last with 7 disciples to represent the nations. That's why the beast, who copies everything that Yahweh does, will have 7 horns to rule with him after taking out 3, because originally there will be 10 as the 10 toes. And this is important because here he's speaking of the 10 toes. He's not speaking of the 7. And he's saying this, and in the days of these kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. When Yahushua came, they told him, when are you going to set up the kingdom? And Yahushua told them, and it is not for you to know the times. You can read it in Acts 1. It is not for you to know the times, because they had 2,000 years to go. It would be sad to them if they realized how long still this world had to go. So it was not for them to know the times. But we come in the end times. Yahweh gives us knowledge, for instance, of the times. And like I said, 10 kings among whom the earth will be divided. So each of those kings will rule over a part of the earth. Then of those 10, another one will come out, and of those 10, 3 will fall. And that one will receive the kingdom from the remaining 7. So my point is, and I'm going ahead of myself a little bit, but I hope nobody gets confused. In Revelation, we see that the beast will rule, and also in Daniel, the little horn will rule 42 months. 42 months. 3 years and a half. We also see that the beast starts to come out in public pretty much as in to be seen and worshipped and accepted as king or world leader, starting with the second seal. But he becomes the world leader pretty much on the fifth seal, pretty much, because he's taken out of the power, he's taken out of the authority or the world during the fifth last plague, the bowl of wrath. So since he lasts 3.5 years, that's why I placed it in the fifth seal, from fifth seal to fifth last plague. But he will start coming out during the second seal. Now, I say that because the two witnesses start on the first seal. So the first witness, the witness like Moshe, starts preaching on the first seal for the same amount of time that the beast will rule, 3.5 years. However, it is counted by days, 1,260 days instead of 42 months. So 42 months makes reference to the beast, 1,260 days to the teaching of the two witnesses. So the witness will start preaching during the time of the 10 toes. And then the beast will come out, and 3 of those 10 toes will be ripped apart. 3 of those 10 horns. When the one comes out to rule as world leader, as Revelation 13 shows. So we see it here because it says, and in the days of these kings, the 10, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom. So Yahushua told them, it's not for you to know the time. I'm not setting up the kingdom yet, because Yahushua came as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. So the last comes as the king with a rod of iron to set up the kingdom. So through his teaching during 1,260 days, by giving the names and the knowledge of the true Elohim and true doctrine to the 144,000, he would be establishing the kingdom, because he would be giving kingship and priesthood to each of the 144,000, as Yahweh promised on Revelation 1:6, among other verses. So, in the days of these kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. So the kingdom, Yahweh, even though Yahushua told us that the kingdom was already here, that was in the spiritual sense. He came to offer it and allow us to enter it through the forgiveness of sins. But the actual establishment of it in the physical sense, in the literal sense of it, will happen during the second coming. When the 10 kings are ruling, Yahweh will start to raise the kingdom that will last forever. And just like gold went to silver, silver to bronze, and bronze to iron, in this case, this kingdom will not pass ever, will last forever. So it said, and in the days of these kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces, just like it talked about Rome. Rome did break in pieces, but now Daniel is talking about the kingdom that Yahweh is establishing. And he's saying that it will break in pieces, just like Rome did, showing that he's going to do it through the last, who comes as a Roman, dressed as Edom, dressed in red, with a rod of iron to break in pieces the nations. So, break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. Consume, because he comes as a Roman, so break in pieces. But he also comes as the consuming fire, so he's going to consume all these kingdoms. Just like Yahushua came as the water of life, the last comes as the consuming fire. So he will consume all those kingdoms. So, break in pieces, because he comes with a rod of iron as a Roman. Consume all these kingdoms, consuming fire, as a king. And it shall stand forever. And it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. This is so important. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone, as we know, the stone is the cornerstone, Yahushua HaMashiach. The stone which is the base, the foundation, Yesod in Hebrew. The beginning of the temple that we would build by being part of that temple through our belief in him, being connected to that cornerstone, which is Yahushua, the beginning of all things, the first, the Word through whom everything was created. The fact that it says that the stone was cut out from the mountain represents the kingdom of heaven. So from heaven, there was a stone that was cut out without a human hand. That means two things. In the physical sense, it means that there was no man who had sex with a woman for him to be born. He was born through a virgin. There was no help from any man for him to be cut out into the world. But in the spiritual sense, it represents the second coming, meaning that is Yahweh himself who prepares the last. Not any man, not any teacher, not any pastor, any rabbi, any school, theology, or whatever. Nobody, no human will give form or cut the stone that Yahweh sends to destroy the kingdoms of the earth. So just like the first came through a virgin, the last, without the help of a man, will be formed into what he has to become, meaning the good shepherd, the king, who has the rod of iron, the overcomer, he who overcomes, the conqueror of Revelation 6, etc. So that's why when it said, you watched while a stone, first and last, was cut out without hands through a virgin, and Yahweh himself is the one who forms or cuts out and prepares the last for his teaching of the 144,000. Was cut out without hands, which struck the image on his feet. On his feet, we see through this that it mainly represents the second coming, because Yahushua came when Rome was just starting. So he came when basically the ties. Yahushua came when the time of this statue was at the ties. But now we see that the stone that is cut out without hands hits the feet. That means that is at the end times, after 2,000 years, at the end of those two legs, on the 2 feet, the last comes as a stone cut out from the kingdom of heaven without hands, without the help of a human. So, it is at the end times that the last has to come to establish the kingdom on earth as the Melech Gadol, to fulfill that which the disciples were hoping to get from Yahushua 2,000 years ago. So, struck the image on its feet of iron and clay. So the last comes to destroy the kingdom of the beast through the teaching, the sword that comes out of his mouth. So inasmuch, going back to 45, inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. That is huge, because even though it hits the feet, it destroys the whole thing. Hits the feet, and it defeats the enemy. Destroys all the kingdoms from Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and the New World Order that they are preparing and pretty much establishing already. They only need the leader. So, inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, look how it puts the clay in the middle. The iron, Rome. The bronze, Greece. The two kingdoms that have passed. Then the clay, which is humanity itself, right in the middle, which has been controlled by all those other empires, which have been controlled by angels, fallen angels. So the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. Silver and gold, Persian and Babylon. Then it says, the great Elohim has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So Daniel was completely sure that he didn't miss the mark regarding the interpretation of the dream. And it's obvious because it is written and it has been fulfilled, like 90% of it already to the T. So verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel. That is so huge, because the prideful king of the world King of Kings, actually prostrated himself, went down before Daniel, giving him honor. So if the king is giving Daniel honor, pretty much makes Daniel greater than the king. So that shows the honor that Yahweh gives his servants. And the person, when a person is humble, Yahweh exalts him in public. But when a person is prideful, Yahweh will humiliate them in public. So Nebuchadnezzar is about to become prideful in the next chapters, and then he was going to become humiliated. But then that will bring him to the understanding that only Yahweh exalts. But Daniel, because of his humility that we already saw many times, is getting this honor. So imagine the whole kingdom seeing the king bowing down before a Yahudi, Daniel. So that shows how at the end of times, represented by this moment, Daniel, represented by the stone cut out without hands. When the last comes as the stone, the king of the world, Hillel, the fallen angel, will have to bow down before him and recognize that Yahweh loved him, Mashiach, first and last. So the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. So they gave him two gifts, an offering and incense. For many reasons. Incense represents the prayers and the works of the righteous, the deeds of the righteous. But it represents his connection with the Most High, using incense to connect with the Most High in prayer. Just like the smoke goes up, so does the prayers. And then it says, verse 47. Well, the fact that he was given offering and incense shows that he is, to this angel, represented by Nebuchadnezzar, as Yahweh to us. So what I mean is that Mashiach, the men, and therefore all men who believe in him, who will receive kingship, those will receive honor from the angels and all the rest of humanity. Just like Daniel is receiving the honor that was normally given to the Most High, offerings and incense. Those were things that were offered to the Most High, to Yahweh, or whatever Elohim they would worship. But in this case, incense and offering for Yahweh, yet it is given to Daniel, because Daniel as Mashiach represents Yahweh. And even the king of the world, who represents the angel, is giving him that honor. As we see also in Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9, that those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim and are not, who say they are Jews and are not, will come and bow before our feet and recognize that Yahweh has loved us. So, that they should present an offering and incense to him. So, Nebuchadnezzar placed Daniel as a king, since all the people had to bring gifts to him, to honor him, as Yahweh will do with the nations regarding Mashiach. Verse 47. The king answered Daniel and said, Truly your Elohim is the El of Elohim. Truly your mighty one is the mighty one of all mighty ones, the sovereign of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, as with Joseph. So we see a clear similarity between Joseph and Daniel. And Joseph is genetically the one from whom the last would come. Daniel is the one that represents the root of the last. Yahushua, who is a Yahudi, is the root of David. The last is the branch of David. Daniel was a Yahudi, but the last is from Ephraim. The only way that the one from Ephraim can fulfill becoming the lion of Yehudah, and therefore the king, is through what Yahushua did 2,000 years ago. So, then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. So he became the head of all the wise men. Also, which would represent the leader of the 144,000, the last at the end times. All the wise men being the 144,000, the real wise, of course. Also, Daniel petitioned the king, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Look how there, even though it says Daniel, it mentions the Babylonian names of his friends. One of the reasons, because he was talking to the king, because this is written in Aramaic, so it makes reference to the Babylonian part, but we still see the name Daniel, which shows the difference between the few and the many. The few continue to respect and honor the true name of the Most High, Yahweh, and his son Yahushua. Yet the many, represented by the three friends of Daniel, actually start using the false names that are given to them by the false doctrines, the false religions. That's why they represent the many who do not accept the name but do accept the commandments. Do not accept the name but do believe that he came and died for their sins and resurrected by the power of Yahweh. So also Daniel petitioned the king, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Daniel sat in the gate of the king. And as we know, the gate is Yahushua. Yahushua is the door. The last is the good shepherd. We see the door and the good shepherd in John 10. First and last, door and good shepherd, or the gate and the good shepherd, because we go through Mashiach to the Father as a gate. But the one who leads the sheep of the Father to him is the last, the good shepherd. So Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That shows that the 144,000 will be in a special place from the one where the many will be like the friends of Daniel. It also shows that the first, the gate, and the last, represented by Daniel, the good shepherd, will be one. So he will receive that authority over the few and the many.